Chapter 4. A Reliable Weakness. The next morning dawned bright but cold. Frost coated the window panes with spirals of ice. Outside, the grass had become a field of thousands of little white spears. I sat on top of my desk and stared out, my forehead pressed against the cold window frame. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. The candle had sunk to the holder in a pool of wax before the sun rose. Beneath it rested the letter from Miss Mabel. I stared past the frozen world, as if by looking I would see through the distance that separated me from my mother and grandmother. A low ache radiated from my chest, making my throat thick. I wanted to tell them about my first day, about Camille and Leda, and the frightening experience of volunteering for the competition. Later, I resolved, straightening my shoulders and banishing the morose thoughts. Don't think about it, no time for pity. The sound of a couple pairs of feet approaching my door brought me out of the reverie, and I slid off the desk just as Camille tapped on my door and called through it. "Bianca, are you awake?" "Yes, come in." Both Leda and Camille stepped inside. An old ratted bag with fraying seams sat on Leda's shoulder, strained by the books bulging inside. She took one look at me and lifted her eyebrow. "Did you even go to sleep?" It was her first display of any emotion outside the range of annoyance and obligation. I was so surprised I didn't know how to respond. "Rough night?" Camille asked, looking me over. A few girls walked down the hall behind her, their dark dresses and long white shirts flashing as they went. I'd been dressed for hours, too nervous to sleep. I hated waiting for the day to start, and spent the time reading a few books on defensive magic. Wrinkles creased my dress. "It's a lumpy mattress," I said with a weak wave of my hand. I didn't want to tell them that in my nightmares I failed the first challenge and had to kneel before Miss Mabel with blood on my hands. "I'll get used to it." "No." Leda shook her head with a grim purse of her lips. "You won't, but eventually you'll get tired enough you won't care." Something in her serious tone sparked my fatigued brain, and I laughed. Camille smiled, but it looked tight, as if she'd missed the joke and couldn't figure it out. The corners of Leda's lips raised. So she isn't made of stone, I thought. Camille fidgeted for a second. "Are you going to wear your hair that way?" she asked. I instantly took in their hair, pulled back into a tight bun at the nape of their necks. Mine fell down my back in a thick ponytail. "No, I was just about to put it up." Leda's eyes slipped down to the hem of my dress, where a pair of leather shoes from Papa covered my feet. The soft suede made it more like a slipper than a shoe. I curled my toes to draw them further under the skirt and wondered how long I could get away with it. The rigid black shoes I saw most of the girls wear, a pair of which sat now under my bed, meant a world of blisters and pain. If she saw them, she made no indication. "Let's go," Leda said, motioning to the hall with her head while I grabbed a matching dark blue ribbon from my desk. "Miss Celia's porridge tastes like chewy leather when it's cold." The dining room was only half full when we arrived, so I didn't have to fight for a full seat on the bench. Camille prattled on about a lesson in herbology, while I put the finishing touches on my hair. The skin on the back of my neck prickled. Instantly alert, I looked around without moving my head and tuned into the sounds around me, focusing my attention on what I could hear through the everyday clatter. Close footfalls, one set and then another. 3 pairs of shoes walking through the dining room. The light talk of the girls at our table died down. "Uh-oh," Leda muttered, her pale face darkening. "Here they come." Someone approached from behind me. I shot to my feet and spun. My quick movement jarred the bench, and a couple girls squawked, almost tumbling backwards. "Oh dear, did I scare you, Bianca?" An enchanting face with the lightest kiss of freckles met me. Priscilla and I stood eye to eye in height, and, I suspected, determination. Up this close, her eyes were a light green color flecked with gold. Hoping to distract attention from the overactive jump to my feet, I gave her a smile. "Not at all," I told her. "Thought I saw a spider." She glanced down and danced back a step, her nose twitching with the cringe. "Yes, well, that's not entirely unexpected in a school this old, is it? Nasty things. My name is Priscilla." She spoke with the drawl of someone from Ashley, the richest village in the Central Network. The affluence of her family was unquestioned if the pearls in her ears gave any indication. School uniforms supposedly kept everyone on an even standard, but poverty and wealth had their own way of bleeding through uniformity. "It's nice to meet the bravest first year in the school." Priscilla smiled beatifically, as if she thought she'd done me a favor by introducing herself. The 2 girls that came with her sniggered behind their hands, privy to an inside joke. One of them had the nose of a pug, turned up and pressed in. Her blonde hair flaunted her jaw in an unflattering line. I recognized her as Jade from last night, the first to volunteer after Priscilla. The other one had to be Stephanie, tall and skinny, a little like a twig with arms. Even her nose was thin and pointy. Priscilla's sweet smile never faltered. "Merry meet," I said with cool indifference. "I'm Bianca Monroe." "Yes," she said, brushing her hair off her shoulder. "I know. We came to talk to you about the competition." Something in the rise and fall of her tone belied her words. Her speech too measured, her blink too practiced. Priscilla held all the cards and wouldn't have it any other way. Apparently, I'd upset a more delicate balance by volunteering for the competition than I'd thought, one that these girls wouldn't stand by and watch. A controller. Perfect. They were easy enough to deal with. "Of course," I said with gracious invitation. "Love to." She paused, her eyes flickering. If she expected me to get nervous just because she dropped from the heavens to speak to me, a first year, she'd be very disappointed. "We're worried about you, Bianca. This competition is very difficult." "Yes," I said, my composure firmly in place. "So I've heard." Her nostrils flared. She smiled with just the corners of her lips. "Yes, well, are you sure you know what you're getting into? There's no shame in dropping out, you know. You are only a first year. How much could you do?" She let out a petite little laugh, and Stephanie and Jade joined in a few seconds too late. It didn't take long for the false amusement to subside. "I think you'd be surprised," I said, matching her cool hauteur. Her pupils constricted. She pressed her lips into a line and lifted an eyebrow. "You certainly are a confident little monster, aren't you?" she muttered. "Better than manipulating a 16-year-old into quitting because I'm scared to lose, I think." Camille gasped and slapped a hand over her mouth. Leda sniggered. Priscilla and her friends sucked in a deep breath together, operating from one mind. Ah, vanity, a most reliable weakness. Papa's advice stirred from the deep recesses of my mind. "Your first job in every confrontation is to establish your opponent's weakness. Strategy starts with weak spots." "Oh, really?" Priscilla said, her tone quivering. "I'll tell you exactly what I—" "It's been great to meet you," I said with exaggerated politeness. The shift of power from her to me was palpable. Taking away her control over the conversation would be the only way to stop her. "I can't wait to see you around. If you have any questions about the competition, let me know." Her eyes narrowed into spikes. "Don't get too sure of yourself, first year," she whispered. "You don't know anything yet. The competition is no game for babies." "Then I'm sure you can quit at any time. There's no shame in backing out, Priscilla." I parroted her cloying tone. We stared at each other for a long time. The dining room held its breath. And then she broke into a wreath of smiles. Her voice carried through the dining room with an airy roll. "Just let me know if I can be of help. Wouldn't want you getting hurt or embarrassing yourself." I wondered how long she'd be able to keep that fixed smile in place. I smiled and turned around, effectively dismissing her before she could leave. Priscilla moved away with a low grumble of what sounded like murderous intent. Stephanie and Jade followed suit. I sat back down, trying my hardest to act as if nothing had happened. Camille turned to me in awe. "You were amazing!" she whispered in an exultant cry. "You really gave it to that witch." Leda took a more practical approach. "Better be careful," she said. "You don't want to mess with people like Priscilla." "She seems like a delightful friend." "That delightful friend has talent to brag about." "Well, so do I thought. Except using it would earn me a fast ticket out of here." "Like what?" I asked, unfolding the cloth napkin and spreading it on my lap. "She's at the top of the third-year class for one, and the Network Protector program has their eyes on her." I laughed so loud it drew the attention of a few first-years nearby, who shot me a dirty look before resuming their conversation. They would not take her as a protector. "Why not?" I could tell her curiosity was triggered by the certainty in my tone, and realized I may have gone too far. The protectors were the High Priestess's spy system. They did anything and everything, from protecting the High Priestess to infiltrating dangerous places like the Northern Network, to fighting pockets of black magic. By necessity, they were secretive. As a 16-year-old schoolgirl, I shouldn't know much about them. "Because she's too pretty," I said, and left it at that. "Well, if that doesn't work out, then she's still got options. She's going to graduate with the Curses and Hexes mark, Advanced Transformation, and Astronomy. Not to mention her family is so rich they burn money for fuel." I met Leda's eyes. "She's not worth being afraid of," I said. She blinked several times and then looked away. For all her disdain and indifference, I sensed Leda hid what she really felt. There were things in my life to fear. A bully with flawless features wasn't one of them. To my relief, a soft tinkling sound filled the air, cutting off our conversation. Miss Scarlet stood, seeming to appear from nowhere, for roll call. I realized the dining room had filled during my moment with Priscilla. 6 cauldrons flew out of the kitchen when Miss Scarlet finished, and landed with heavy thuds on each table. Bowls and spoons distributed themselves amongst us. Camille let out a sigh. Leda's right, Bianca. Priscilla is the best witch of all the students. You should see her do transformations. She changed a bat into a dove. She even made Michelle look pretty. She's going to crush you during the competition. Thanks, I said in a dry tone as Camille scooped a pasty blob of oatmeal into my bowl with a resounding plop. I appreciate your support. Camille muttered under her breath, violently shaking out her napkin and almost whipping the girl to her left. But I saw the corner of her lips turn up for just a moment. We started into breakfast without another word.